Hey art nerds, I'm back with another watercolor tutorial. We're going to be painting on a fan again today. And today we're going to be painting some beautiful morning glories. There's nothing quite like going out for a walk on a summer's morning and seeing the open, dew-covered morning glories. So this was painted for the Nashville 2019 Cherry Blossom Festival, and it was painted using Komorebi paint on a fan. You can find links in the description below to all the materials that I used. I begin by sketching my morning glories out using Pilot Color Eno lead in purple, a little bit of orange, and some green. And the reason I like using this lead for this particular purpose is it basically seems to dissolve away when I paint over it, leaving us with lineless watercolor. If you're a little bit insecure with your watercolor and you don't necessarily want to go straight to paper with your paint, this is a great intermediary step that allows you to plan and design what you're painting without making too many mistakes. I will warn you guys though that this paper is very thin and very prone to snagging, so be careful when you sketch on it. So I am mixing up a lot of green. We're gonna paint the background in nice vivid green. So we've got a regular middle green and then we've got a yellow green, and I am filling in the background with that beautiful vibrant light green, leaving our purple morning glories unpainted. And for this background, I want to experiment with doing a little bit of negative painting. And that is not when you're negative about your painting. That is when you utilize negative space and leaving areas unpainted to help develop form, color, and contrast. So I am floating in some darker green while our lighter green is still wet. And I am working basically from yellow to blue in terms of the types of greens that I use. Blue is going to push things back into the background, and yellow is going to bring them forward to the viewer. Yellow is also going to give the implication that things are hit by the sun. So I am adding in another layer while things are still just a little bit wet. Some of the paper is wet, some of the paper is dry. That gives us kind of a diffused layering. So we're going to end up with some sharp edges and some soft edges, and you can already see how I'm leaving some of the leaves unpainted. That's what I mean by negative painting. Believe it or not, these paper fans, thin as they might be, can take a fair amount of water. So doing these sort of really wet, loose washes isn't really a problem. Now I'm floating in some darker, cool blue, and that's going to make leaves seem to recede into the shadows. Adding in just a little bit more green to help saturate some of the colors. And I'm still painting with a synthetic quill. I will caveat, I don't like this particular quill. I find it to be very drippy, very droppy, and I would recommend instead that you use a natural fiber sumi brush. It's going to give you the flexibility and coverage that you need. Adding in even more dark blue, I'm slowly building up colors, working both wet over dry and wet into wet. Now I begin by painting the golden sunny centers of our morning glories. I will say that this paper does not blend out if you're doing, if you're painting wet onto dry and then you want to blend out with water. It doesn't blend out quite the same way Western watercolor papers will blend out, so that's just something to keep in mind when you're painting your own fans. Now I'm using a nice warm mauve color to paint our morning glories. We're going to go from this sort of red violet to violet, but you got to start somewhere. And I don't mind that little wet into wet slip up of the green pooling into the red. I kind of like it actually. I like when we can see the hand of the artist. What I really love about these fan projects is they are surprisingly easy. You do not have to be a master artist or a master painter for this to turn out nice. Adding in a little bit more of the red violet. And as with the quince fan, I am working from reference. Now I'm adding in some dark purple. It cools things down significantly. And I find that working from reference, particularly for things like this, really frees me to focus more on technique than on thinking about what to draw. So if you've always wanted to watercolor and you're not sure where to start, honestly, starting with florals is a very easy place. Most florals have very basic shapes, they're very easy to replicate, and it doesn't have to be perfect to look good. And while I love watercolor, I don't want it to be precious or feel overly precious. I like making items that people can afford. I like making items that people can use and items that people can put up and actually enjoy. So most of my watercolors are originals designed for your average consumer. And I still have this hand fan in stock. If you would like to own it, if you'd like to take it home with you, please feel free to get in touch with me via email. As with my last fan piece, and as with most of my watercolor illustrations, I work from large forms to small forms, lack of detail to tightly detailed. So as you can see, I've switched over to a smaller brush. This is a Neptune synthetic, and I'm using darker, more saturated colors to begin adding in some details, darker blues, darker violets. Adding a little bit of extra orange to the center, as well as a little bit of pearlescent white. If you're interested in learning more about watercolor, I have several step-by-step, very basic tutorials that explain basics like contrast, color mixing, creating a palette, and more. Now I'm going to use some pearlescent fine tech watercolors to add some shimmering details. As I mentioned earlier, I don't want my art to be overly precious. I like it when people use my art, so I like adding metallic details like this because when you flutter the fan, when you fan yourself with the fan, it seems to shimmer in the sunlight. So I like adding things that invite people to either come closer or to view the piece from another angle or to handle or manipulate the piece in some way. Basically, I want y'all all up in my art. And I'm trying to be delicate with where I add my metallic details. I don't want it to be too gaudy, and I'm not aiming for the entire thing to be metallic. I just want there to be surprising hints here and there that make the fan a little bit more interactive. And I am using the older Fine Tech metallic set for this. It had, or rather pearlescent set for this. It's got a beautiful rainbow array of colors, and I find it to be a really versatile, useful set. All that's left are to add a few white details using white gouache. For those of you who don't know, gouache is an opaque watercolor that's worked much more thickly than traditional watercolors, so it can be a great way to add in additional highlights or to correct mistakes. I want to thank you guys so much for helping me paint this fan today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it inspiring. If you want to make your own fan, please check out the description below. I have links to where you can purchase these products on Amazon. When you purchase Amazon products from my links, I do see a small bounty, so that's a great way to help support the channel. Thank you guys.